Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. In this clip, Bishop Barron is going to ask the question, why do we believe in God? Now, it's interesting. He's not asking the question why you should want to believe in God or is there a God. He's really getting into the emotional response that all of us have towards God. It's really interesting to me that the majority of the world, billions and billions of people, do believe in God. So I think this shows that we do want to believe in God. And I think he's going to get into the ideas of desire, and beauty, which I think are so paramount and important to the question of why do we believe in God. Let's see what he has to say, though, and then I'll have my live reaction on the back end.
Question: how do we know there's a God? Why do we believe in God at all? That's the foundation for the whole spiritual life. And the great theologians and spiritual teachers have used different approaches to this question over the centuries. One of my favorites is the approach that begins with desire. We human beings desire the truth. Our minds seek the truth. And we get it sometimes. But no matter how much truth we get out of this world, it's never enough. The mind remains unsatisfied. Our wills seek the good, and they find it in a lot of ways in this world. But no matter how many goods we attain, we're never really satisfied. We seek justice in all kinds of ways, and we achieve it, sometimes to a remarkable degree. Think of in our own time, the civil rights movement, the end to apartheid, the breakdown of the Soviet Union. All those were wonderful things that were attainments of justice. But no matter how much justice we attain, we never have enough. There's something in us, this desire for the good, the true, the just, that pushes us beyond this world. This approach is called the argument from desire. You can't desire what you don't know. Therefore, if we're desiring something that transcends anything in this world, in some way we must already know it. Therefore, we do know the truth itself. We do know the good itself. We do know justice itself. And that's who God is. God is not one of the true things in the world, but God is the truth itself, which has seized the mind of any scientist, any philosopher, any seeker after the truth. God is not one more good thing in the world, but God is goodness itself, which has seized anybody when he's living the moral life or seeking the ethically good. God is not one more just thing in the world, but God is justice itself, which has seized the will of the lawyer or the judge or anyone seeking justice. The Bible talks about the primacy of God. When you're seeking God, the most important thing to realize is you've already been found by God. Remember the Russian cosmonauts went up into space and they kind of sarcastically radioed back to Earth, well, we're up in the heavens and we haven't found God. Well, of course, any biblical person would know you'll never find God that way. Of course not. You don't find God anywhere in the cosmos he's made. But God is the creative source of all that exists in the cosmos. So that's one approach to God, beginning with our own deep desire. Here's a second approach, and it comes from our present Pope, who wrote a great book in 1968 called Introduction to Christianity. In that book, he formulates this argument. And what I like about it is it shows the link between religion and science. Because very often those two are seen as enemies. He says, no, at their depth, religion and science come together. Here's why. What does every scientist assume? Whether you're a physicist, a chemist, a biologist, psychologist, whatever you are, you assume that being is intelligible. That means that the world can be known. Look, even the name psychology, designates logos, word. The scientist goes out to meet a world that's imbued with meaning. Well, how do you explain that? How do you explain the universality of the meaningfulness of the world? Ratzinger said, it's because it's been thought into being. In other words, the world is not just dumbly there. Rather, the world is filled with logos. It's filled with reason, with mind, which is why when we understand a truth, we say we recognize it. He says, right, you recognize it. you think it again, because it's already been thought into being by God. So he argues from the objective intelligibility of the world to the existence of a great intelligence which has thought the world into being. Here's a third approach the philosophers and theologians have used. It's called the argument from contingency. It's a fancy way of saying that the world as we know it exists, but doesn't have to exist. You and I are here, but we don't have to be here. There's nothing necessary about our being. And it's true, the world as we know it is fleeting, it's passing. Therefore, we have to go outside the world to God. God who does exist through himself and who therefore grounds and creates the whole of the world that we know. Relatedly, Dorothy Day, when she was in the process of coming to the church, she was going through a process of conversion. She had a child. And one day when she was on the porch of her house and she was holding her child, she said, I felt a gratitude that was so enormous that I knew it would correspond to nothing in this world. There was nothing, nobody in this world she could possibly thank that would correspond to the gratitude she was feeling. That's it. That's exactly it. What she was sensing was, God, this world, myself, my child, none of it has to be here, yet it's here. And the proper response is, thank you to the person who made them.
So that was interesting. As always, Bishop Barron wants to get to kind of an abstraction or a philosophical argument. Even when we're talking about desire or emotions, it always seems for him to resonate into an argument, which I find to be quite interesting and eloquent. So that kind of threw me off guard. I was not expecting him to get into kind of argumentative to an argumentative disposition to answer this question. Now, he does get into kind of like the sociological perspectives on why we do want to believe in God. And he talks about desire, he talks about truth and justice. But the overarching thing that I think is penetrating into this video and through the thoughts of Bishop Barron is this desire for something that transcends this world. Specifically mentioning here with Dorothy Day, just seeing, I guess you could say, the beauty in the child and how that transcends the immediate experience of just the finite and temporal nature of things in this world, I guess we could say. I don't know if I'm correctly analyzing that. I was trying to ponder and reflect upon all of the things that Bishop Barron was saying here. But I guess what I really got from this was in the beginning, where he talks about desire and how, since we do have a desire for something that transcends this world, this is really C.S. Lewis, and I think he's picking this up from C.S. Lewis, it must mean that we were made for another world. Why do people believe in God? Ultimately, because they don't want this world to be all that there is. Why do people believe in God? Because ultimately they desire the truth in a comprehensive and total way that they don't receive in this life. It points to something beyond. Undergirding all of Bishop Barron's arguments and responses here is, I think, Aquinas in thinking of God as pure active being. So not in a linear sense, but in a hierarchical sense. So how that necessarily plays out, for example, is that God is goodness, God is truth. Those aren't things that are disconnected from God. They are God in and of itself. Now, anything that we could think of about God or truth is analogous to the total truth. Anything that we could think of that is good is analogous to God, who is goodness in and of itself. Any justice that we see in the world is really just analogous to the ultimate justice that we find in Jesus, that we find in God. And so, why do you believe in God? Because you desire something other than the temporal and insufficient answers and reasons that we find here below. Why does this matter? I think that's a good question, because I was going to say something like, why this matters is because you might get an argument that is a truth claim that you find interesting and you find compelling, but ultimately it's not doesn't have a finality to it, and therefore you believe in God because God transcends that. I think Bishop Barron would kind of push against that after listening to his response, but I think the reason that we believe in God is because we long for transcendence, and not only do we long for transcendence, we long for an ultimatum, if I can get that out. And I guess what I mean by that is we long for pure goodness, we long for pure truth, we long for pure justice, and we know that we won't find that in this world, and we find it in the face of Jesus Christ and in his return. And we know that if we believe in God, we have a hope that transcends this world. We have a living hope that awaits us and our inheritance that we are to receive when Christ returns. That's 1 Peter. Very bad summary of 1 Peter, the first part of the chapter there. But there is this sense that we have a longing and expectation for something that we do not necessarily have in the here and now, but are longing for and awaiting for. That's why we believe in God. All right, that's all I have for this video. I hope that reaction makes some sense. There was really big concepts going on with what Bishop Barron was saying here, which means it was hard to kind of summarize. I mean, if I don't necessarily understand what Bishop Barron is saying, how in the world am I going to summarize what he is saying? But at least I think there might be some truths or nuggets of wisdom that was embedded within that response. All right, that's all I have. Remember that Christianity is Christ, and without him there is no Christianity. See you in the next one. Peace.